January 25, 1947, 7:42 a.m. Al Capone woke up to the sound of breaking glass downstairs in his Miami mansion. 3 armed men had just broken in, and they weren't there to rob him. They were there to kill him. As footsteps pounded up the stairs, Al desperately reached for his gun, but his syphilis-ravaged hands couldn't stop shaking. The most feared gangster in America was now trapped like a helpless animal, and the men coming to execute him were sent by the one person he trusted most. In 60 seconds, Al Capone would discover that his own wife May had hired assassins to end his misery and collect his hidden fortune. This is the story of Al Capone's final tragic years, when the king of crime became a prisoner in his own mind, and how the people closest to him plotted his death while pretending to care for him. The nightmare had started 20 years earlier. In 1928, Al Capone was at the height of his power. He controlled Chicago's underworld and made millions of dollars from illegal alcohol during Prohibition. He owned judges, police chiefs, and politicians. Everyone feared him. But Al had a secret weakness that would eventually destroy him. Al had been visiting prostitutes since he was a teenager. In those days, many prostitutes carried syphilis, a deadly disease that attacked the brain and body. Al caught syphilis when he was young, but he never got proper medical treatment. Syphilis is a slow killer. It can hide in the body for years before it strikes. Al felt fine for decades, while the disease quietly spread through his nervous system. By 1938, Al was in prison on tax evasion charges. That's when the syphilis finally reached his brain. Prison doctors noticed that Al was having memory problems. He would forget conversations minutes after having them. Sometimes he didn't recognize his own lawyers. The doctors ran tests and discovered that syphilis had damaged Al's brain beyond repair. The disease had been eating away at his mind for 20 years. When Al was released from prison in 1939, he was already showing signs of mental illness, but his family kept his condition secret from the public. Al moved to his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida. The house was like a fortress, with high walls and armed guards. Al thought he was safe there. But Al's mind was getting worse every day. May Capone, Al's wife, watched her husband slowly lose his sanity. The man she had married was disappearing before her eyes. Al would have violent outbursts where he screamed at people who weren't there. He would accuse May of stealing from him or cheating on him. Sometimes he threw furniture and broke windows. Other times, Al would sit quietly for hours staring at nothing. May would talk to him, but he wouldn't respond. It was like he was already dead. May hired nurses to take care of Al, but he attacked them. He thought they were FBI agents trying to poison him. 3 different nurses quit after Al threatened them with knives. Al's brother Ralph tried to help, but Al didn't recognize him anymore. When Ralph visited, Al would ask, "Who is this stranger in my house?" The worst part was that Al sometimes became violent toward May. During his confused episodes, he would grab her by the throat and accuse her of betraying him to the police. May started sleeping in a separate bedroom with the door locked. By 1945, Al needed constant supervision. He couldn't dress himself or remember to eat. May had to hire male nurses who were strong enough to control him when he became aggressive. The medical bills were enormous. Al's treatment cost thousands of dollars every month. May was slowly running out of money. Al had hidden millions of dollars during his criminal career, but May couldn't find most of it. Al had put the money in secret bank accounts and safety deposit boxes, but his damaged brain couldn't remember where. May searched through Al's old papers and questioned his former associates, but nobody knew where Al had hidden his fortune. Meanwhile, Al's condition was getting worse. In 1946, Al stopped recognizing May completely. He would look at her like she was a stranger and ask, "What are you doing in my house?" May would cry and try to remind Al that she was his wife, but he didn't understand. To Al, May was just another person trying to steal from him. Also started having seizures. He would fall to the ground and shake violently. The doctor said the syphilis was destroying more of his brain tissue. May realized that Al was going to die soon, and she was going to be left with nothing. That's when May made a terrible decision. May had heard rumors that Al had told his closest associate, Johnny Torrio, where he had hidden his money. If May could find Torrio and make him talk, she could locate Al's fortune. But there was a problem. Torrio had been hiding from Al's enemies for years. The only way to find him was through Al's old criminal network. May contacted Frank Nitti Jr., the son of one of Al's former lieutenants. Frank Jr. knew where to find Torrio, but he wanted something in return. "If you want Torio's location," Frank Jr. told May, "you have to do something for us first." Frank Jr. explained that several of Al's former enemies were still alive and wanted revenge. They had been planning to kill Al for years, but they were afraid of his reputation and his armed guards. "If you help us get to Al," Frank Jr. said, "we'll tell you where to find Torio and the money." Métis was horrified by the suggestion, but she was also desperate. She had spent her life savings taking care of Aleti, and she had no way to support herself after he died. After weeks of thinking about it, May agreed to help. The plan was simple. May would dismiss Al's bodyguards and leave the back door of the mansion unlocked. Frank Jr. and his men would sneak in early in the morning when Al was alone. They would make it look like a robbery gone wrong. May would inherit everything, and Frank Jr.'s people would get their revenge. Mace told herself that she was actually doing Al a favor. He was suffering every day, and his mind was completely gone. Death would be a mercy. But on the night before the planned assassination, May couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the early days of their marriage, when Al was strong and protective. Pals had always taken care of his family, even during his worst criminal activities. He had been a loving husband and father. May wondered if she was betraying the man who had given her everything. At 6:30 a.m. on January 25th, May heard a car pull up outside the mansion. Frank Jr. and his men had arrived. Macy walked to the back door and unlocked it as planned. Her hands were shaking as she turned the deadbolt. 3 men dressed in black entered the house through the back door. They were carrying guns and moving quietly toward the stairs. Macy realized this was her last chance to change her mind. She could scream and wake up Al, or she could call the police. But May thought about the money. Without Al's hidden fortune, she would be poor for the rest of her life. May went into the kitchen and turned on the radio loud enough to cover any sounds from upstairs. The 3 men crept up the stairs toward Al's bedroom. But Al had heard the breaking glass when they forced the back door open. Al's mind was damaged, but his criminal instincts were still sharp. He knew danger when he heard it. Al rolled out of bed and grabbed the loaded pistol he kept in his nightstand drawer. His hands were shaking from the syphilis, but he managed to hold the gun. Al heard footsteps in the hallway outside his room. He counted 3 different sets of footsteps. The men were trying to be quiet, but Al had been listening for assassins his entire adult life. Al positioned himself behind his bedroom door and waited. The first gunman slowly pushed open Al's bedroom door and stepped inside. The room appeared to be empty because Al was hiding behind the door. As the gunman moved toward the bed, Al struck him in the head with the butt of his pistol. The man collapsed unconscious. The second gunman heard the noise and rushed into the room. He shot him in the chest. The man fell backward into the hallway. The third gunman panicked and started shooting wildly. Bullets flew everywhere, shattering windows and mirrors. Al ducked behind his dresser and returned fire. Despite his shaking hands, one of his bullets hit the third gunman in the shoulder. The wounded gunman stumbled down the stairs and escaped through the back door. Mace heard the gunshots and realized that her plan had failed. Halfa had somehow managed to defend himself. Mace ran upstairs and found Al sitting on his bedroom floor, surrounded by broken glass and blood. 2 men were lying nearby, one dead and one unconscious. Al looked at May with confusion in his eyes. "Maisie," Al said. "What happened here? Who were these men?" For a moment, Al seemed almost normal. The shock of the attack had somehow cleared his mind temporarily. May realized that Al didn't understand what had happened. His damaged brain couldn't process the fact that she had betrayed him. "I don't know, Al," May lied. "I heard gunshots and came running." Al tried to stand up, but his legs were too weak. "Call the police," he said. "Someone tried to kill me." May knew she couldn't call the police. They would investigate the attack and discover her connection to Frank Jr. "The phones aren't working." May lied again. The gunman must have cut the wires. May helped Al into a chair and bandaged a small cut on his forehead. The unconscious gunman started to wake up. May realized he could identify her as the person who had let them into the house. Mace picked up Al's gun and shot the unconscious man in the head. Al watched in shock as May killed the wounded attacker. "Why did you do that?" Al asked. "He was going to hurt you," May said. "I had to protect you." Al's confused mind accepted this explanation. He hugged May and thanked her for saving his life. May felt sick with guilt, but she also felt relieved that her secret was safe. May dragged the 2 dead bodies into the basement and buried them in the backyard that night. She told the neighbors that she was planting a new garden. Maggio never found Johnny Torrio or Al's hidden money. Frank Jr. disappeared after the failed assassination attempt, leaving May with nothing but guilt and fear. But May's troubles were just beginning. 3 days after the attack, May received a threatening phone call. "We know what you did," a voice said. "You set up our boys to get killed." May recognized the voice. It was Tony Accardo, one of Chicago's most dangerous gangsters. "I don't know what you're talking about," May lied. "Don't lie to me," Accardo said. "Frank Jr. told us everything before we killed him. You made a deal with us, then you let Ale murder our men." May's hands started shaking. She hadn't known that Frank Jr. was dead. "You owe us 2 lives," Accardo continued. "Either you pay us $50,000 or we're going to visit you again." Money didn't have $50,000. Al's medical bills had drained their savings. "I need time," May said. "You have 1 week," Accardo replied. "If we don't get our money, you're going to join your husband in hell." May spent the next week desperately searching for Al's hidden money. She found old maps in Al's desk that showed locations around Chicago. Some had X marks on them, but May didn't know what they meant. May drove to Chicago and visited several of the marked locations. She found nothing except empty lots and abandoned buildings. May also questioned Al's former doctor, who had treated him in prison. "Al mentioned safety deposit boxes," the doctor said, "but he never told me where they were located." May visited dozens of banks in Chicago and Miami, but none of them had records of accounts under Al's name. Meanwhile, Al's condition was getting worse every day. Il had started having violent nightmares about the assassination attempt. He would wake up screaming and try to fight invisible attackers. May had to tie Al to his bed at night to keep him from hurting himself. During the day, Al would sit by the window and stare at the ocean. Sometimes he would talk to people who weren't there. "Johnny, is that you?" Al would say to empty air. "I've been waiting for you to visit." May realized that Ale was talking to Johnny Torrio, his old mentor who had disappeared years earlier. One evening, Al seemed more alert than usual. He looked at May and spoke clearly for the first time in months. "May, I need to tell you something important," Al said. May leaned in close to hear him. "The money is in the walls," Al whispered. "Behind the painting of my mother." May's heart started racing. Was Al finally remembering where he had hidden his fortune? May ran to the living room, where a large painting of Al's mother hung on the wall. May carefully removed the painting and examined the wall behind it. She found a small hidden panel that opened when she pressed on it. Inside the secret compartment, May found a metal box. May opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of keys and a notebook with addresses written in Al's handwriting. The notebook contained the locations of safety deposit boxes in banks all over the country. May had finally found the key to Al's hidden fortune. But when May returned to Al's room to thank him, she found him unconscious on the floor. Al had suffered a massive stroke while May was searching for the money. May called Al's doctor, who examined Al's and delivered devastating news. "Al is dying," the doctor said. "The stroke has caused severe brain damage. He probably won't live through the night." May sat by Al's bedside and held his hand as he lay dying. "I'm sorry," May whispered to Al. "I'm sorry for everything I did to you." Al's eyes opened briefly, and he looked at May. "I forgive you," Al said with his final breath. May wasn't sure if Al really understood what he was forgiving her for, but his words brought her some peace. Alda died at 7:25 p.m. on January 25, 1947. May used the keys and addresses from Al's secret notebook to access his hidden money. Over the next several months, May recovered over $2 million from safety deposit boxes around the country. May used some of the money to pay off Tony Accardo and his gang. The rest she kept for herself. May lived comfortably for the rest of her life, but she never enjoyed the money. She felt guilty about betraying Al and causing his suffering. May donated large amounts of Al's money to Catholic charities, hoping to find forgiveness for her sins. May also hired private investigators to find the surviving members of the gang that had tried to kill Al. One by one, May had them eliminated in revenge for threatening her. May hired professional killers to eliminate Sal Benedetto, Mike Romano, and Vincent Caruso, the 3 men who had been involved in the plot against Al. Most became as ruthless as Al had ever been, but she did it to protect his memory rather than for personal gain. May kept detailed records of her revenge killings in her diary. May's revenge campaign lasted for 3 years. By 1950, she had eliminated everyone who had been involved in the plot against Al. But May's guilt about betraying Al never went away. May started drinking heavily and taking sleeping pills to deal with her depression. May also became paranoid that Al's ghost was haunting her. She would see Al's face in mirrors and hear his voice calling her name at night. May finally moved out of the Miami mansion in 1952 because she couldn't stand being in the place where Al had suffered so much. May spent her final years living quietly in a small apartment in Chicago. May died alone in her apartment on April 4, 1986. She was found 3 days later by her landlord. When May died in 1986, she left behind a detailed diary that explained everything she had done. May's diary was discovered in a storage unit that May had rented under a false name. The diary contained over 300 pages of May's handwritten confessions about her betrayal of Al and her subsequent revenge campaign. May's diary revealed the truth about Al's final years and her desperate attempt to save their marriage and their fortune. The diary also contained the locations of several more hidden caches of Al's money that May had never found. May had drawn detailed maps showing where Al had told her to look for buried treasure. One map showed a location in Grant Park in Chicago where Al had supposedly buried a briefcase containing $100,000 in cash. Another map showed a spot in the Florida Everglades where Al had hidden a metal box containing jewelry and gold coins. Investigators estimate that millions of dollars of Al Capone's fortune is still buried in secret locations around Chicago and Miami. Treasure hunters continue to search for Al's money, but most of it will probably never be found. Some treasure hunters claim to have found small caches of Al's money, but none of the major hiding places have been discovered. Al Capone's legacy is complicated. He was a ruthless criminal who caused tremendous suffering, but he was also a man who loved his family and tried to provide for them. In his final years, Al became a victim of his own choices. The disease he caught from his criminal lifestyle destroyed his mind, and the people he trusted most betrayed him for money. Al Capone died alone and confused, not understanding that his own wife had tried to have him killed. The king of crime had fallen, and even his family couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. If this story of betrayal, illness, and the price of a criminal life moved you, subscribe for more untold stories of how history's most notorious figures met their end. Like this video if you believe May Capone was justified in her desperate actions, and comment below, could you forgive someone who betrayed you if they were desperate? Next week we're revealing another story of how a criminal empire fell apart from within, destroyed by the very people who built it. Remember, even the most powerful people can be brought down by the consequences of their choices, and sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we trust the most.